All right. Happy Monday. Welcome to another Ask Me Anything Live. How can I help you, ladies?
Well, I have 3 questions.
Okay.
So you can stop me anytime and give Barbara a turn. I got sidetracked on my website document. So I got back to that this weekend and was going through the workshop with all that. And I have 2 questions, and then I think I might have 3 of them done.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So the easy one is in the privacy policy. We're supposed to make a document of sub-processors of our data, which I had never thought of before. So it's an interesting exercise. And I'm like, man, I'm probably forgetting somebody. One question was, do I say Google or do I say Google Analytics?
Yeah, you want to be specific about which of the Google programs you're using. So Google Analytics, obviously, would be one of them if you've got that turned on, you're checking analytics. Other data processors are going to be like your, whoever you use for your CRM or your email processing.
Yep, I got that. I use MailChimp.
Yeah, any payment plan, like any payment processors associated with your services, that's going to be another data processor. If you use some party will use specific companies for opt-in forms, they might process some of your data in order to get it over to your CRM, right? So you have to look at what are all the components behind my online business and the ways that data gets transferred, even if it's, uses one processor to get to another processor.
Right. Yeah. So right now I've kind of slimmed everything down. So I don't have that.
Okay.
I'm not even collecting. I don't even have a form up right now for my email list. So mainly it's my Mighty Networks community and anything connected with that. So one of them I wondered about is Zoom, because I set up Zoom events. And I suppose when people join that, Zoom keeps some of their information.
Yeah. And that's right, because you can go in and issue reports to yourself later, right? You can see, and especially if you're hosting events where people have to sign up and they also get a notification from Zoom. So some people will use Zoom to host little meetings.
Mighty Networks is doing that for me. So I've got Mighty Networks listed.
Okay.
And then I've got, PayPal, Stripe, Zapier, because I use that, and my Acuity calendar stuff.
Yep. Your calendar is another one. And what you want to do is both label the company and provide a link to their website so people can click over, look at their terms, etc. And if possible, provide a link to their contact page or something, so that if somebody wanted to contact them directly, let's say they wanted to go to PayPal and say, how long do you keep this information or whatever, right? And so long as you have a link to their website, that's enough. I don't want you to have to constantly update this form to be watching for, did one of these companies change their contact link? But to the extent that you can make it easier for people to find their way to get their questions answered, that's always helpful.
Okay. So I think that's probably okay. And then my other question, which is a little bigger, is in the, let's see, what's this called? The website terms. You had a paragraph about that any content that people give, I can do whatever I want with, basically.
Yeah. So,
and that one, because I'm running a membership site and I'm working with other small business owners, I want them to feel comfortable sharing what they're working on, what they're thinking about, and even their private, their IP, without thinking I'm going to use it.
Right.
Because I don't want to use it.
No. And it's not about their IP. You're talking about the end use, I know
user generated content
license. So what that is if somebody messages you or emails you and says, hey, Marcia, module 4 of your course, or this thing you taught the other day on your live stream, was amazing. Can I share it inside of my group? Or can I, do something with it? Or, they contact you through your, call it your website, your platform, they send you information, or maybe they say, I went through that specific section of your teaching or your course, and it totally changed the way I do X, Y, and Z in my business. You might want to turn around and use like that kind of a statement in your marketing,
Right.
like screenshot it, how people do, like, it's almost like a mini review or a little, feedback that you could use and say, hey, this specifically led to this result for this person. Of course, best practices are going to be that you ask that
Yeah, I
person.
would reach out for sure.
Right. And some people, this is meant to be kind of a CYA, so that if you forget to do that, or your VA forgets to do that on your behalf, and you end up using that content or reposting it somewhere, you do have the rights to do that, for commercially reasonable purposes, right? Not just for anything. And like I said, best practices are to ask people if you can use, a statement or something that they submit to you, in the way that you want to use it. But in the event that you don't, or you forget, or you screen capture like a whole bunch of comments, you're still able to use that if you've got these terms in place. Now, you could always implement your own set of terms inside the group, right? So things that we say here will be confidential. If I want to use something that you've posted, I will reach out and ask you, right? So for example, a lot of my clients will host a Facebook group, right? Same kind of a concept where
same concept. Yeah.
Yep. And so I've got a template that is like the Facebook house rules, right? So you do want to also have house rules in place for a platform or a forum where you're bringing people together. But, for purposes of your website terms and conditions, these are the terms that people are agreeing to when they opt into or visit your website, right?
Well, and I was using these on my Mighty Network because I use it both as a website and as a community thing. So,
right.
So yeah, because that paragraph starts with, you agree that any content you submit to us.
Yeah. And it's a little bit tough because of the way that you are using Mighty Networks. It's a little bit tough to distinguish. You could change that language to say, again, your own version of what you want that rule to be. So for example, anything that you share, in confidentiality about your business will remain confidential. The thing, you can't make a statement like that though, unless you have other people agree to confidentiality.
I just want to say it's not, I can't agree for anybody else.
Right. And this is where, you would just want to define, if you post something that I feel is really important to share, I will reach out and ask you for permission to use it. Like, you could change that paragraph if you feel like it's not a fit for the way that you are doing business.
Okay. So I could do that. I was like, I compared that paragraph with what Mighty Networks said in their privacy policy. And they actually say your content stays yours.
Yeah. And privacy policy is a little bit different. And the way that,
this is their terms of use. Sorry. It's their terms of use.
No, that's all right. And the way that they use, let's be clear that the way Mighty Networks provides a service is very different than what you're doing on Mighty Networks.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So I would not refer to their terms as applicable to your business, because it's an entirely different use. Yeah.
Okay.
They're saying that in regards to you as a user, right, any content that you create remains your own. And that's also, let's be clear that even on the license, user generated content license language that we're talking about, we're not talking about taking over anybody's IP. We're not talking about owning any of their IP or their content that they've created.
So it's not even content that if they post about it, it's not about that. So like, they're in my network where I help them create a course with their IP. And they're saying, okay, my IP is this in a post that they put up.
Yeah, you don't suddenly then own their IP. There's no transfer of IP rights. You could use a comment about like, oh, Marsha's amazing. She helped me do X, Y, and Z.
So it's about that kind of thing.
It's about that kind of stuff that I want you to be able to use to your advantage. And so if you don't have a user generated content license in place, then you have no rights to use any of it. Right.
So if I put this in here and somebody comes back to me and says, hey, I can't share anything because of this, I can say that's not what this is about.
Well, you can just say it's not about your IP. I don't own your
Okay.
IP. It's about if you make
Okay.
a helpful comment in the group, I can screenshot that and use that in marketing to help other people understand, etc. It's not about a
Okay.
transfer of any ownership rights in IP. It is about
Okay.
giving you the rights to use certain kinds of content.
Okay, perfect. I can do that.
Okay.
Okay, and then I
Good
had
question.
one last thing. And you may not know because it may be dependent on my state, but I have an LLC in Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to change the name of my business. So I noticed there is a form I can fill out and just rename the LLC.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know if it's better to just start a whole new one or to rename it. In which case I'd have a new EIN and I'd have all, go through
Yeah.
all that.
Well, the question around like renaming, and welcome. I see Banking Institute. I don't know who that is, but welcome to the call. We're talking to Marcia Chadley about renaming an LLC. And to be clear, Marcia, I'm not licensed, to practice law in Colorado. Generally speaking, when I talk with people about renaming a business, the question becomes, especially from a transfer of liability perspective, were you doing something before that is different than or has liability related to the LLC than what you're doing now? Or is it just a continuation of the business? It's just a new name.
It's an evolution and we're doing new things. So what we used to do a lot of in-person self-development workshops, which we probably are not doing at all now. And I'm doing more of, we also used to, but very small piece, work with other small business owners. And now that's become the focus.
Okay. So it's a continuation and an expansion of one of your services, and then you're dropping off the other.
Yeah.
So the question I would ask is it a new business or is it really the same business, just an evolution of services? Right? Because here's the thing.
To me, it's the evolution of services, but to a client, it probably looks like a whole new business for most people. Because most people wouldn't have known about that part of my business unless they were other small business people.
Yeah, got it. So then my next question is, was there something that you were doing in that personal development work that you think creates some kind of risk that you want to eliminate?
You have different things because we had a physical location and all that stuff, but I haven't thought about the risk that I want to eliminate. No.
Well, and I mean, unless there was, because usually risk is going to come out of certain kinds of services. One, if you are providing certain kinds of advice, you've got a large number of clientele and somebody relies on that advice and then something goes terribly wrong, right? And they feel that you're responsible.
And no, I haven't done that.
Yeah. Or if you hosted a large event and there was an injury or something related specifically to an event. So yeah, so I would suspect that the risk is quite low of the continuation of any risk that existed in your previous work. So the question becomes then, does it make sense from a tax and business filing perspective to go through the fees associated with closing down a business, restarting a new one, getting a new EIN, et cetera, right?
Okay.
To me, that trade-off probably doesn't make sense because your business has evolved. I mean, I don't know. I can't sit here on the call and say I know and understand completely every risk that existed in your previous work. But if there's been enough time between that type of service and what you're doing now, and the risk has not already arisen, my guess is that it would probably make sense to do a name change, and it's going to be a nominal fee to just process that paperwork. Right. And so long as the structure itself still makes sense, the LLC structure for you.
Yeah, that's no different. So then the only difference really is, do I want to make a break between any risk, any liability in the previous business and this one? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. That's really good to know. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, totally. Most business formation questions and even, evolution of business questions really have to do with assessing liability. Where does the liability live? Is there a big need to cut it off or stop it from continuing? Is there a way to do that with, business formation strategies? So, yeah, just something to think about. But my guess is that there's probably not a lot of liability there.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. So a name change and then an update on all of your legal contracts is going to be
Right.
sufficient, right? You want
The
to,
bank and all that kind of.
yep, identify the, the updated entity, etc.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank you much.
Yeah, good questions. Hi, Barbara. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm so glad to have hit on you on this on the right day. Because
Oh,
I knew that
excellent.
you went from what, weekly to monthly, and
I did.
so
Yeah, last year
getting
I
to the
was every week. This year it's just once a month.
So, well, my question is concerning using YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that there is a share and that think link is always a good thing. If someone wants to use a YouTube video for training purposes within their company, I suppose ideally they would share that link with each person. But if they want to do it as a group thing, I'm not sure how far the permission to share goes.
Yeah, well, and you definitely have to look at purpose, right? The question that I ask people, especially around any commercial use, right? So you're talking about sharing within a company, generally that's going to be related to a commercial use, is that unless you have a license to use that content, and you'd have to examine, the YouTube, the license, because my guess is what YouTube is going to say is, look, we're a platform that hosts this content. We're not responsible for it. And we do not own the IP, right? So even though they've got a share functionality on there, that doesn't mean that as to the original content creator, that actually should be shared in the way that you want to share it. So generally, when it comes to commercial use, if you have not paid for that license or you have not created the content itself, I absolutely would not use it for a commercial purpose. Really put you at risk. You could reach out and ask the content creator, say, hey, I really, really like this content. Can I share it within my business and get, express consent? You want express written permission or consent to share it in the way that you want. And if you get that, then great. There, your liability, really slims down. So, the one thing is, and I just tell people this in regards to any content, whether you're sharing online for social media, whether you're sharing for any other purpose, if you don't own it, you haven't created it yourself, or you don't have an express license to use it in the way that you want to use it, right? Because there can be limited licenses for certain types of use. Then don't use it until you get one of those things, right? Until you reach out and get express written permission. So, without knowing the exact specifics of the scenario, without looking at the terms, that would be my best advice for you.
So sometimes training departments within a company find something, a YouTube video that would be perfect. Let's say something as simple as, I don't know, how to do pivot tables in Excel or something. And so they would like to use that to train staff. And it could be in a class, a confined class, not just broadcasting it out on their website or even on their intranet.
Yeah.
But wanting to use it for training purposes. So that's how you would answer that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the mistake that people most often make is thinking like, oh, it's online, so therefore it can be used for any purpose. And that's what gets people into a lot of trouble. And so without knowing the specifics, without seeing, did the content creator themselves create terms around this? Or they, you could reach out and say, I love this particular video. Here's how we would like to use that. Are you okay with me sharing it in that way? That to me is always the safest bet, because short of that, you're just assuming that because it's on some public platform that it's free to use in that way. And I cannot state it enough that people cannot make, those assumptions and expect there to be no problems.
Right. And some would try to pull in a fair use argument.
Yeah, so fair use, there's exemptions to copyright, right? So the United States federal copyright law basically says whoever creates the work, whoever is the originator of the work, owns the rights, right?
Right.
And nobody else can use them, can use that work in very specific ways. There is an exemption from copyright law that is based around fair use. And fair use, though, typically is quite limited. It is analyzed on a case-by-case basis, and it generally is not involving the commercial world. You're talking about newscasters, you're talking about, education, like in an educational context, parody, satire. There are very, very specific instances where you can draw light to a specific work, you can critique it, you can share it, you can talk about it, but none of those generally apply in the commercial context. And so bringing somebody else's, it would be a little bit like, here's an example that is clearly off limits. Bringing somebody else's, so maybe a coach or consultant and you've been through one of their trainings, and suddenly you take their work and you duplicate it inside your company and train everybody inside your company with that, even though that was not the original intended use of their training for you as an individual, right? Or you get somebody's book, right? And you then set up a course and teach their book content inside your company. That could totally be violating their intellectual property rights, because they likely are the ones teaching that content themselves. So, there's lots of ways that parties will kind of accidentally co-opt other people's content, just not understanding that whenever you're doing something like that in a commercial context, which means to make money off of it, that you're probably in violation of any number of laws, but especially copyright laws.
Well, I know that there is movement to use fair use more broadly. You probably know Patricia Offerfield and Peter Jazzy of the CMS, whatever, the best practices in fair use documents. And it's interesting that, for example, the history of the Grateful Dead, that they wanted to use concert posters in the historical timeline. That was for commercial use, and they asked for permission, didn't get it, went fair use and got the fair use. Or the Two Live Crew Pretty Woman, of course, I guess that went the parody route, but so that I have usually been very strict on the commercial and non-commercial, and yet there are examples of commercial use, being fair use. I realize that it's very case specific.
Yeah.
It depends.
Right. And without getting in and doing, a full analysis of the scenario, I can't provide legal advice on this call. It's just that, I primarily try really hard, because one of the biggest ways that clients and people in the online space get themselves into hot water is with copyright violations. And it is not fun to defend those claims, right? You end up almost always paying something in order to get them settled, because it's too expensive to go litigate them unless you've got insurance that's going to step up and defend what you did. And so, that's one of the biggest mistakes that online entrepreneurs and people in the business world make. And so it's an easy one to spot, and it's an easy one to keep people out of if they, just know the rules. And I have a really strong sense of ethics around that. And to me, I think ethics would solve a lot of our online and digital space problems when it comes to ripping off other people's content. But by far the best practice is just contact the content creator directly and say, can I use this? Because I personally would never want to be using content if it was not intended to be used in the way that I am asking to use it. Right. So there's a pretty straightforward way to get a response, which is just to reach out and ask.
Yep. That's always the ideal. And
totally.
There's that risk continuum that people fall on.
Yeah.
And, I'll never infringe, or if I do, I'll buy my way out of it. Well, yeah, that would be pretty expensive.
Yes, I know.
So thank you for clarifying that, because I have people who ask about using YouTube in their training programs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's if it's a commercial training program and not free public education, I'd say no. Yep.
Okay. But they could perhaps give each person the link, and they would be responsible for how they utilized it.
Yeah. And my answer to that is it depends how it's disseminated, depends what's communicated when it's disseminated. It depends what the purpose is of it being disseminated, right? Still gets down to the same analysis.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks so much.
Yes. Good luck. All right.
you.
Well, this is perfectly a short call today, which is great because I've got pickup for my kids at lunchtime. Any other questions, Marcia?
Well, I just to echo on Barbara's, I actually have YouTube content, and I have had people reach out to me because last year I started by helping people get on Zoom. So I had multiple churches and libraries and senior centers, especially reach out and say, can I embed your video? And I hadn't thought about why they were asking, because I thought, well, it's on YouTube, you could use it. But now it really makes sense. And I was always, fine with that. But it would be a different answer if it was someone who was going to make money on what I was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a different answer. And embedding content is different than sharing it, right? Sharing a link.
I didn't realize at the time.
Yeah, you don't ever want to embed somebody's content into because I have to go through this with folks. So they're like, oh, well, I shared this one video that I loved. It was just music and had pretty pictures that went with it. And I said, well, what did you do with it? Oh, well, I put a link on my website. Okay. Putting a link on your website, like just linking over, or you actually recreated the video through that link in a live, viewer on your website. And they're like, oh yeah, that one. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. You cannot, use those without permission, because there could be any number of commercial reasons that, that boosts something that ends up, benefiting you commercially speaking, monetarily, and you've used somebody else's content to do that.
Right.
So,
well, and plus I don't think they show ads if it's embedded. Whereas if people are watching my content on YouTube, there's an ad that's seen. So the benefit for me is different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not sure about the ads. I mean, the other thing that people used to try to do is get around the functionality at the end of YouTube videos that would take them somewhere else, right? Somewhere else entirely.
That happens now. So you can't
get
around
it. Went away. You can't code. You used to be able to insert a little snippet of code and get that to go away. You can't.
Because I used to do that with my own videos on my own website.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes,
now
that drives me crazy that it bounces over to something else, and it might be related to mine or not. And
right.
So you can't block it, huh?
Yeah, I know. Kind of well, and that's just part of a free platform, right? It's designed to share more content and keep people there.
Right. Yeah. That makes so sense.
Yep. All right, ladies.
Well, thanks so much.
Yeah,
nice
thank you.
Meet you, Marcia.
Good questions.
Nice to meet you, Barbara.
Take good care.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.